I know David Morgan's not showing up. I remember that email.
We are live.
All right, well, welcome to tonight's meeting of the Durham Planning Commission. Tonight is our first retreat of 2022. There will be no public hearings for tonight's meeting, and there are no formal action items being taken by the Planning Commission tonight. And we are receiving an update on the comprehensive plan process, and we'll be having a discussion around that. And before we get started, first, I would like to introduce a new commissioner. Dr. Bradley Batista joins us for the first time this evening. I actually just found out about 30 minutes ago, or maybe an hour and a half ago, that Commissioner Batista would be joining us, but welcome. And if you'd like to provide any introductory remarks, you may do so at this time.
Okay, sorry about that. Everybody had a little technical difficulty. But yeah, basically about me in a nutshell, I'm a geoscientist, a geophysicist, and a certified geospatial intelligence professional. I've been in industry, federal, and academic. Overall, I work with maps and data, just to be simple, and specifically I study the footprint people leave in their digital and physical worlds. So I'm happy to be of service to my community here today, and I support the initiatives that we're working on together. So thank you everybody for having me here. I look forward to it.
Awesome, well, welcome aboard, and it's great to meet you. Other than that, Michael, I think we need to take attendance and then can pass it over to staff.
Sure, thank you. I'll just read off names. Amendolia.
Here.
Baker.
Here.
Batista.
Here.
Busby.
Here.
Cameron.
Here.
Oh, I saw Cameron. Cutright.
Here.
Durkin. Don't see her. Harrod.
Here.
Thank you. Lowe. I don't see. MacIver. Do not see. Morgan. There was an email from Morgan saying he wasn't going to be attending. Cease.
Here.
Thank you. Carmen Williams. Nope. And Zuri Williams. I think I saw her. There she is. Thank you, Chair Amendolia.
So thank you, Michael. It's good to see everyone who is able to attend tonight. I know the past few weeks have been chaotic for many with the recent surge in Omicron. I hope everybody's had a safe and healthy holidays, and hope everybody got some rest. Scott, I believe you're kicking this off tonight. Turn it over to you.
I am. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Although really what I want to do is, before we get started, and thank you all for taking the time to be here tonight, I want to introduce a new member of our team working on the comprehensive plan. Her name is Sarah Long. See, she just popped on the screen there. She's a planner who's been working with us since about October on the comprehensive plan. She's not new to the planning department, though. She was in a different role in our minor engineering group before that. She's both a planner and an engineer, which is rare, although we have a couple of people like that on this call right now. So I'm going to just make sure everyone got a chance to meet Sarah, and she's going to do the actual kickoff.
Hi, good evening, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm excited to be at this first retreat. Like Scott mentioned, I've been working with the city for about 2 years now. I was recently working in minor development engineering, and I'm glad to join the PLED team. What I wanted to do was get us started off with some introductions to kind of give everyone an opportunity to give a brief introduction. In the meantime, I'm actually going to put an icebreaker in the chat. And our icebreaker for tonight is, what is Durham's biggest planning challenge? So if you can, and you'd like to participate in the chat, just write what the biggest planning challenge is. And if you can just go around with introductions, perhaps starting with the chair, Austin.
Yeah, sure. I'm Austin Amendolia. I'm the chair of the Planning Commission. I've been on the commission for, I guess, a year and a half now. And in my day job, I work for an economic development, real estate, and urban planning consulting firm. So thinking a lot right now, thinking a lot about housing issues, which tends to be what y'all hear me yammer about in these meetings.
And if you wouldn't mind just passing it off to someone else who hasn't introduced themselves.
Sure. I'll pass it to, let's go to Vice Chair Cameron.
Good. Oh, y'all can't see me. It's dark. Good evening, everyone. Kim Cameron, Vice Chair. I've been a member of the Planning Commission for about, I think, a year and 2 months. Full time, I am the executive director of a real estate foundation related to a university, an HBCU here in North Carolina, where we invest in real estate economic development to help the university grow and also benefit the neighborhood in which the university sits in. Thank you.
Let's see, let's go ahead and pass it to Commissioner Harrod. And Commissioner Harrod, if you do your intro, you can choose the next person.
Okay. Bruce Harrod, and I've been on the commission since June of last year. I formerly owned a commercial general contracting company and recently sold it to my employees. So I have quote unquote retired. I'm not too sure I like retirement, to be honest with you. So this is part of giving back to the community. I've lived in Durham for about 40 years, so quite fond of it. Biggest challenge, that's a good question. To enable everybody to have economic equal opportunities to, provide for their family and provide wealth. I don't know if that's the major one, but that's what I'm thinking of. So I'm going to pass this to Mr. Cease.
Thank you. My name's Tony Cease. I have been, I guess, a resident of Durham in one form or another, off and on for probably close to 30 years, but permanently since for about 15 or 16 years. And am an urbanist by inclination and a generalist by profession. Depending on the setting, I'll play my architect card or my civil engineering card or my planning card, all of which come in handy at times, but that means I'm not an expert at anything. I just know how to ask some questions. I think they're hard to boil down the biggest challenges we face in planning in Durham, but I would say expectations may be the one word I would pick, and expectations informed by just status quo practices and the built surroundings that have been created over the past 30 to 50 years, and how we get over that siloed way of thinking, both internal to the city and in terms of professional practices and community expectations. So I'll stop there. I don't know who's left here. Is our newest commissioner went? Does he get to go again, or did I already miss that second time?
I don't mind taking another shot if we have some new people in. But yeah, Bradley Batista, I've been in Durham for a few years, but have lived either north or south of here for my whole life, with some hiatuses where I was outside of the country. So if you're wondering what bad city planning looks like, there are plenty of places in the world that can show you that. So we're far from that, but we do have some challenges. So that's why I'm interested and excited to be here.
So I think Commissioner Cutright has not on yet.
Yeah, sure. I'll jump in there. Gary Cutright, been on the commission now for I think right at a year, if I'm recalling. Time flies when you're having fun, as they say. So been in Durham for about 6 years, and I am the owner and broker at Calculus Commercial, which is a commercial real estate firm. We specialize in land assemblages and infill development, investment properties, and so forth. So in terms of challenges, I mean, you know, you've got your typical affordability, equity, and all those things, but I wouldn't call that a necessarily a planning department issue or challenge. I think one of the bigger challenges that we're seeing right now is maybe lack of resources. You know, the time bottlenecks that we're seeing, and you know, maybe it's lack of resources, maybe it's you know, how we do things, but regardless, I think that's a challenge that we're currently facing. We being the planning department, not me specifically. And let's go to, I don't think Mr. Baker went yet.
Yeah, hey everybody. I am sitting in an airport right now in Denver. So if you hear any background noises, that's what it is. I was actually born and raised in Durham, and have lived in Durham and various other parts of the country, outside of the country, over the years. I've been on the Planning Commission for a little over 3 years now. And my background is I'm an urban planner. So I've been in the public sector and the private sector over the past 10 or 11 years. Most of that time doing community plans, comprehensive plans, small area plans, and full UDO rewrites. I would say that we kind of touching on what Commissioner Cutright was mentioning, there are a lot of problems, a lot of big problems, but there are some problems that regarding planning that we actually have some power over. So one thing I would just say is, you know, over the past 3 years, we've approved a heck of a lot of exclusionary, unsustainable suburban sprawl. And that's something we actually have quite a bit of power over changing. And we can create a more transformative, we can transform the way that we build our city if we want to. And that kind of gets to the expectations issue that Commissioner Cease brought up. So I think that's something that we have power over, and something that we can really do to make Durham a better, more inclusive and walkable place over the next 15, 20 years. And, you know, after we're gone, leaving Durham better. So let's see here. Help me out. If there's anybody left, please go ahead and go.
We've got Commissioner Zuri Williams and Commissioner Busby.
Okay, Zuri.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Zuri Williams. I have been on the Planning Commission for 6 months now. In my full-time job, I am a real estate broker. I help individuals buy and sell residential real estate in the city. And I answered in the chat. I think affordability, I think there are a lot of issues that come along with just the city growing exponentially and continuing to grow. So I'm happy to be here and help. And I will pass it to Commissioner Busby.
Great, thanks. And I'm Brian Busby. I've been in Durham 20 years. I've been on the Planning Commission 6 years, and I am executive director of a statewide environmental conservation and environmental justice nonprofit. And as I put in the chat, I noted just a challenge of creating an equitable plan for the future that ensures affordability, but also protects quality of life.
Awesome. So that's all of our commissioners. So you also wanting to go through staff members, give them a chance?
Yeah, I think it'd be great if we could go through the staff members as well. Maybe we can start with
Awesome.
Scott.
That's where I was going to go next as well. Perfect.
Hi, I'm Scott Whiteman. I am the manager of the Policy and Urban Design Group for the Planning Department. I've been in that specific role for 6 years, but I've been with the Planning Department for a little over 15 years, and I've also lived in Durham that whole time. Let's see, why don't we go to Kayla?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Kayla Seibel. I'm with the Planning Department. I've worked for Durham for about 3 years now. Yeah, and I live in Durham. So I will pass it to Brooke.
Sorry, Chair. Can we have the staff say what the biggest planning challenge is?
Ooh, you're throwing our question back at us. So I think, just to give a little bit of a different answer, I think one of the biggest challenges that we face is being able to fund enough to keep our infrastructure up to the quality that we expect based on the amount of growth that we're getting, and without making it even more expensive for people to live in Durham.
And I'll just chime in with others said before. Definitely agree. Housing affordability, access to affordable childcare, affordable transportation, all of that, and definitely equity are major challenges.
All right, I think Kayla passed it off to me. So good evening, everyone. I'm Brooke Ganser, also with the Policy and Urban Design team. I've enjoyed being part of this team and the Durham community for about 2.5 years now. And yeah, I definitely agree with what everyone has been adding to the chat. I think the biggest challenges facing Durham kind of stem from Durham's population growth. It's a very popular area to come and live, and there's a lot of challenges associated with that: affordability, housing, transportation. We have to have enough infrastructure to support people coming in here, and also to support the people who have lived here all of their lives. So yeah, excited to be with you all here tonight. And I'll pass it off to Carl.
Everyone, my name is Carl Kolasna. I'm a senior planner with the Policy and Urban Design team. I've worked in this team for about 3 years now, and I've been with the city of Durham for a little over 4 years. I started in the Development Services Center as basically the main walk-in person. If you walked in and had a planning question just off the street, I was sort of the first line working the desk there, which was interesting to get a lot of perspectives on the planning issues that impact people in their day-to-day lives and how to work through those. I would say I definitely concur with what everybody has said. I've been working, we'll talk a little bit about our policy working groups. I've been thinking about a lot about this today, but transitioning to carbon neutral or renewable energy systems in Durham is an enormous challenge. That certainly there are things that we as the planning department or as people involved in development influence, but it's a larger, it's a systems-wide issues from energy utilities and state regulations and things like that. So I think that's a really big one that I haven't heard yet. I will pass it along to Mike Stock.
Carl, I think you might have had to step away for a minute. Yep.
Sure. So then I will pass it to Lakita Mcdonald. Nikki.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Lakita Mcdonald. I'm a part of the PUD team. I've been on that team maybe about a year, going roughly into 2 years now. And it's to help change policy. As everyone has said, I agree with everything that I've heard so far about the areas that we need improvement. I'm also a resident, so happy to be here.
I think I might be the last one left. If I miss someone, they can go after me, but I'm Lisa Miller. I also work with the Policy and Urban Design team. I've lived in Durham, I think 16 years and been working for the department for 15, doing all kinds of different things. And I loved hearing all of the things that y'all brought up about some of our biggest planning concerns. I think another one to add to the mix is just kind of how we find the right balance of what's good for our community and what's good for individual residents in our community. Can be a tough one to work through. So we'll close with that.
So I think we might also have Chris. I know he's kind of like hosting the meeting. And then I don't know if Mike made his way back.
So I think Chris got us started and then now he's going back to his regular life. So he's not here anymore. And we don't know where Mike is. He'll probably be back.
Sarah, I don't think you shared your biggest planning challenge yet, did you?
I didn't. No, thank you. Yeah, it's kind of echoing what a lot of people have said. I think our biggest challenge is equity. And that really goes for making sure that people can afford to live here safely, healthily, have academic opportunities, educational opportunities, economic opportunities to sustain themselves and thrive. And that's for the people who have been here for generations and the folks that just showed up yesterday. And sort of how to balance that with the population growth and all the movement that's happening. So yeah, I want to thank everyone for your answers. This actually is similar to what we've been doing with our engagement, the type of questions we've been asking to residents and folks who have been a part of the engagement. And Carl is going to give us an update on what's been going on since the last time you all met.
Yes, thank you. I think we've got short, brief little slides that Scott will be pulling up in just a second. Okay, great. So good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Kolasna, and I'm just going to give a quick update on how engagement is going for this phase of the comprehensive plan so far. So at our last retreat, we shared information with you all about our plans for engagement this fall, and that engagement phase basically began with collaboration with our contractor, Ideal Ortiz, and our engagement ambassadors to determine how we engage residents on the place type map and to develop materials for engagement. So in October of last year, we publicized a series of community meetings, and we invited residents to join one of those meetings to learn more about the comprehensive plan and how to use the engagement tools that we've been developing through this phase of engagement, which is ending January 31st. So we are currently working on a lot of things. We're working with, one is that we're working with engagement ambassadors to engage their community members in conversations around the future of how land is being used in their neighborhoods. We've also held the first 5 of those 6 planned community meetings that I just talked about. And we've created 2 introductory videos for use in the community meetings and to share with community members. One of those is focused on helping folks understand what the different pieces of the comprehensive plan will be. And the other one is walking folks through using an interactive web GIS map that we've developed to add comments and input on a draft place type map, which is the future land use map for this plan. We're seeing resident input being populated on that map. It's kind of cool. It comes in real time. So as people submit comments, they appear on the map. We'll be walking through the map designations, those place type designations in more detail with you all this evening. And we'd really love to help get your help over the next final weeks of this engagement as we're finishing out through January to bring this opportunity, the map, and the tools that we've created to the attention of folks that you're connected with in your community. Again, before this is ending, this phase of engagement is ending January 31st. Our outreach team and our policy working groups have also been helping to invite their friends and neighbors and family members to engage as well as we're working through this engagement on the place type map. So if you can go to the next one, Scott. So we also wanted to provide an update on the policy working groups, which many of you here are involved in, and there's a lot of overlap with our outreach team and our engagement ambassadors there as well. So as we're engaging residents on the draft map this fall and into the winter, these groups are working towards draft policy recommendations for the new plan. So these policies are going to be the focus of community engagement in the spring of this year, once we're done with this engagement round that's focusing on the place type map. So since the August 2021 kickoff of that group, we've been holding monthly meetings with those working groups together. And basically that started with a meeting all together in October of last year. So the focus of that October meeting was working to bring young people into those groups and working with the Office on Youth to develop community agreements that will help create safe space for young people and adults, community members, and staff to all work together to develop policies in these policy working groups. We just wanted to put a plug. We're extremely grateful to the Office on Youth staff, Laura, Elise, Nori, Jamie, and Jalen, and the Changed by Youth ambassadors who've plugged into this work and brought a really great youth perspective into the policy working groups. So that October meeting that I was just talking about was followed by individual group meetings in November and December. So each of the 6 individual policy working groups are going to continue to meet throughout January, February, and March in preparation for the spring engagement on the policies that's going to start roughly in April of this year. So during November and December, each group focused on brainstorming policy ideas that help us work towards the adopted community goals and objectives, which were adopted by a joint session of the City Council and County Commissioners last summer. So once those groups have policy ideas, and staff will be working on creating fuller draft policy statements with those ideas, looking across the topics between the groups to see how the policy ideas could work together. And these policy statements are then going to be further iterated on by the working groups in the first part of next year, again, February and March, to create the final draft policies for community engagement by April. So bringing together a mix of residents and staff in these groups has been really impactful, especially hearing residents' perspectives and ideas in this space. We're focused on ensuring resident perspectives and ideas are reflected in our draft policies, just like we did for community goals and objectives. And we're also trying to build resident understanding on the different topics related to the comprehensive plan and to build staff understanding of resident experiences and perspectives as well. So we're really excited to be doing this work together in a cohesive group. So that's pretty much all of the updates that I've got. If there's anybody that has any general questions about fall engagement or the policy working groups, I'll be happy to answer them before I hand it off to Kayla, who's going to be talking more specifically about the place type map. And my colleagues have dropped link to the final, the 6th of those 6 community meetings that'll be happening on January 12th. This is an opportunity for people to kind of get up to date where we're at on the comprehensive plan and learn a little bit about the tools and ways that we've been developing to engage on the place type map.
Thanks, Carl. I did want to just briefly echo appreciation for everyone who's been involved with this. And I know the way I've interacted most through this process has been through the policy working groups. I've been in there with Brooke working on the transportation group, and it's been really good. And I see that there's a lot of work going into that, and others are participating in that as well. So appreciate and see all of you and the work that you're doing. Do any folks have questions on the engagement before we move forward? I see none. So,
okay. Well, we'll have plenty of time for questions at a later date. Later in this meeting, if anything else comes up or anything pops into your head. So yeah, with that, I'm going to hand it off to Kayla, who's going to be walking us through the place type map.
Awesome. Thank you, Carl. Good evening, everyone. So I'll be covering this next section on the place type map, and we also wanted to make sure we did a deep dive into the place type designations and kind of what went into this first iteration. So we'd love to hear your thoughts about how this first draft map, how your review has been going. Hopefully you have all seen the map we've published, and we can add that in the chat. So we'd love to hear feedback or suggestions from you all on what's in here before we end engagement at the end of the month, January 31st, so we can work through your comments and incorporate them in the next draft of the map. So as we've discussed before, the land use planning and policy work for this plan builds on the community goals and objectives to make that vision a reality. So for this phase, our work is focused on getting input on the initial draft place type map. And as a reminder, place types are descriptions of what the community wants to see for different areas in Durham in the future. The place type guide, which you all helped us review and provide edits and suggestions, a very early version of that. That includes all the place types we've developed based on previous engagement and our adopted community goals and objectives. We've developed 20 draft place types for all of Durham City and County, and the guide acts as a key to understanding the map. So together, the place type map and the place type guide will replace the future land use map that we use today in our development review and that you all see in staff reports. So we wanted to begin with kind of zooming out to the countywide level to look at the growth management strategy that we're proposing in this initial draft before we talk about the individual place types. So we have 3 growth management principles: the urban growth boundary, future growth areas, which are both shown on the map, and the 15-minute community concept, which is embedded in how the place types will work together. So this was something we talked about at our last retreat, and we heard some great feedback from you all about how to make that clearer as an overarching principle. So it is not a standalone place type as it was before, if you remember that early draft. So if you just briefly go to the next slide, just so you can see a static image of an earlier version of the map. If you go to the map link now, you'll see a bunch of comments that residents have already added their feedback on. So this is just an earlier static image of that. So the urban growth boundary, and Scott, if you can help circle on the PowerPoint, thank you. That is a growth management tool to replace the current suburban rural tier boundary found in the current comprehensive plan. So if you're familiar, we have that tier boundary. So this urban growth boundary is in generally the same place, and I'll describe some minor differences or some differences between that boundary and this one. So this is a line where staff is recommending water and sewer infrastructure not be extended beyond in order to preserve our environmentally sensitive areas and rural and agricultural areas out on the outside the city, and generally the county limits. So as I mentioned, the recommended urban growth boundary is generally the same as the current tier boundary, but with a few exceptions. So this will get in the weeds a little bit, but in case you are interested in the minor details here. So some areas currently in the suburban tier that are removed from the urban growth boundary are in northeastern Durham, near Stagville Road, Hamlin Road, and Glen Road. So much of these areas are in the Falls Lake critical watershed area. So those would be difficult to serve with public sewer. So those are outside, now recommended to be outside of the urban growth boundary. In northwestern Durham, the boundary is adjusted to better align with topography and watershed boundaries. So that's more of a technical update there. And areas within Orange County, if you remember our future land use map that we have now, kind of juts out into Orange County a bit. The areas within Orange County that are not already in the city have been removed and at the request of city administration. And there are other minor adjustments to reflect annexation agreements or minor utility service issues. So these are just parcels that planning has zoning authority over here. One significant area that is added into the urban growth boundary is the Arrowhead area of West Durham. You can see Scott circling that on the map there. This was placed in the rural tier and in the current comp plan as a policy choice, but this is an example of an area that could be relatively easily served by city fire and sewer. So that's the urban growth boundary. So the future growth areas, that's relatively adjacent to the urban growth boundary. You can see they're shaded a little bit differently. These are areas that staff is recommending that should not see significant development until critical infrastructure is in place. So generally, like I mentioned, these are areas on the edge of the urban growth boundary that will need a new fire station and or a sewer lift station. And just as a note, we use fire and sewer as a guide because those are two critical services that are designed to serve a specific geography, and they impact development activity and development pressure out here. So that's the two big boundaries here that cover the county. And I think if we go to the next slide, I just want to touch on the 15-minute community concept. Don't worry about reading all this on the page. We have, so the 15-minute community concept as our third growth management principle. This is not something that's mapped. It's a concept that describes complete neighborhoods that make up Durham where residents can access their daily needs by foot, bike, or transit ride within a 15-minute trip. So this kind of community requires existing spaces to change incrementally, especially in communities where there are currently little or no options for accessing daily needs, as well as encouraging complete new communities to be built as well. So this concept is described in detail in the draft place type guide. And this is an excerpt we're showing here. And this is a concept that came through in our community engagement specifically, and that forms the basis of how the other place types fall on the map. Some things to highlight here: variety of housing options, areas, neighborhoods and areas in Durham should expect to see, if there are vacant lots, that those be filled in, especially with uses that help residents access things they need, like grocery, civic or institutional uses, things like that. Improved transportation network, better connectivity, prioritizing those who walk, bike, roll, or ride transit. And then development should preserve surrounding natural areas as much as possible, and really just a focus on filling in those underused spaces. So on the next slide, we've created a simple graphic to convey how place types are depicted on the map, connected to how they may appear in real life. So this graphic is from our resident engagement toolkit, showing that there are different categories of places that we distinguish on the map. So a two-dimensional depiction of that. And they all work together to form complete communities. So the guiding principle for applying the place types in this first draft is how our places can provide better access to the things that residents are saying they need in their communities. So again, while we have these 20 different place types, they're still broad and they capture differences in character and are mapped in this way to depict a patchwork of places that form a complete community. So now let's dig in a little bit more into the place types specifically, and I promise we will have lots of time for discussion and we will walk through an example. So going into how we designated these on the map, there are many ways that you can group the place types to convey either degree of change or existing places or new places. But for the next few slides, we're showing some common methodologies that we used for this first draft. So places listed in this slide right here, established residential, planned suburban neighborhood, community institution, recreation and open space, suburban commercial, and highway commercial. Generally, these are places that exist today and should expect to see smaller changes over time. And we used property tax data to inform that designation. These places should see the addition of more housing, green space, connectivity, and access, but may not see large scale redevelopment type of development out here. In the suburban commercial and highway commercial examples, there are some sites in Durham that are going to be primarily accessed by car, where transit investment is not planned or not prioritized. So they may still see some changes, like filling in of parking lots with new buildings, but the density won't be large scale, like in an area where that transit investment exists. So we wanted to call that out because where we saw potential for more of that density or a mix of uses, we indicated those on the map as a different place type. Again, as you look through the map, if you see places like this where you have a different perspective or on this, please let us know specifically where we should reconsider a place type. Okay, so on the next slide, places listed here, so this is the bold black letters: institutional campus, employment campus, utilities and public works facilities, and resource extraction. They're pretty straightforward. These are places that exist today. We use zoning and ownership information to identify these specialized place types. Employment campus is the Research Triangle Park area, and institutional campus is Duke, NCCU, Durham Tech. There's language in the guide that talks about how residents see these areas serving the surrounding neighborhoods and providing access to jobs, education, and training. So again, the guide is really important for understanding more about how these places should change over time. The details like this can't be captured very easily in just the title of the place type. We've identified utilities properties on the map to account for those, and there are only 2 resource extraction sites in existence today that we show on the map as well. Those are the quarries. All right, just a couple more. So for these 2 place types, this is the downtown and the transit opportunity area place types. We use the existing development tiers to first identify transit opportunity areas using the compact neighborhood tier, if you're familiar, on our future land use map, and then downtown is the downtown tier. Existing identified compact neighborhoods, except for RTP North, which no longer has a commuter rail station, are identified as transit opportunity. And established commercial or mixed use areas with transit access that could see significant change are designated as transit opportunity area as well. And then key intersections and corridors with, again, this good transit access where the land use pattern has not yet been established. That's marked on the map as well. Through our policy work, we want to make sure that these areas are sensitive to impacts on surrounding neighborhoods while still supporting that transit investment. So if you have thoughts on that, please let us know about how we can write our policy to support that goal. Next slide is, so these are the two rural place type designations, the rural and agricultural reserve and the rural village center. Again, we used our proposed urban growth boundary to identify those areas here. The rural village center are the hearts of Hema and Rougemont, so capturing more of that commercial out there. And then everything else is generally the rural and agricultural reserve place type. Okay, finally, for the rest of the place types, mixed use neighborhood, mixed residential neighborhood, apartment and townhouse neighborhood, neighborhood services, traditional manufacturing, and general industrial. We used several different things: land use context, service availability, land suitability, transit availability, to determine where these, what the remaining parcels should be. And we just want to highlight a few of these. So with mixed residential neighborhood, these are larger infill or greenfield sites. So greenfield sites meaning out, typically found in this kind of edges of town, with significant environmental features on them. So this place type recommends clustering or doing some sort of conservation design for development that goes out here. For the mixed use neighborhood, these are larger infill or greenfield sites that we found where the location or the size of the property makes it a bit more viable or desirable for commercial. So more of a mix of residential and non-residential. And for neighborhood services, these are small sites found throughout Durham where it looks like there could be opportunity to provide more goods and services to neighborhoods. So you'll see that throughout the map as well. So those are one way to group the place types to get the broad strokes on how they're mapped out. But hopefully this helps narrow down where you want to focus more with your review aside from specific geographies. And you can take a look at how these are grouped by the larger land use umbrella that we have here, or degree of change. And I did forget to mention that these headers right here where it says mixed use places, residential places, community places, that's how it's organized in the place type guide. It's just another way of thinking about how these roll up into maybe some bigger categories. And then, yeah, with that, we wanted to make sure we looked at an example together. So I handed over to Scott to walk through an area of the map from a recent case you all reviewed recently. And then we have some time for questions, discussions on any of this, and we can walk through more examples of whatever is most helpful for you. Thank you.
Thanks, Kayla. So we went back and looked at some of your recent cases to try to find one that might kind of show how this would work if the place type map was in place today. So we went back to last month to look at one of the cases you all heard for the case on Ellis Road, which probably most of you remember. So as you know, this is the site at the intersection of Ellis Road and 147, which had been zoned commercial previously, and which the applicant was asking to change to I think it was a PDR designation for apartments. So if we look at how this site and the surroundings would look on the place type map, so we know it's it's part of an overall larger development that has already been approved and under construction, that is likely to remain mostly like it is, as it is through the life of the comprehensive plan. So that's why it's designated as planned suburban neighborhood up here. Like most planned suburban neighborhoods, it has recreation and open space amenities built in and provided by the HOA. There's the existing entitled and under construction commercial, which is designated as suburban commercial, since Ellis Road does not have any transit service or doesn't have any planned in the near term. See, we've got some employment campus across the street because that's for the Research Triangle Park. And we have also some apartment townhouse development over here, some existing apartment complexes. So this was a site where when we started putting the map together, we did look at all of the active zoning cases to see what was being proposed and one, to get a better idea of, we want to make sure, we want to push the envelope, we want to be visionary, but we also want to be realistic. So they gave us an idea of what sort of things the market was trying to develop. And if we felt that what was being proposed met the goals and objectives and met the criteria and of the place type guide, we included that as part of the draft place type map. So that's why the site you all considered was apartment townhouse. So based on that, what the case that you heard was consistent with the place type map and the place type guide. But I think from your discussion at that meeting, which was centered a lot around how do you make these apartments walkable, and particularly how do you make them walkable and accessible to the commercial across the street, I think is an important reminder of how the policies and the place type map need to work together. The map by itself does not make walkability or equity or anything like that. It's the policies in conjunction with the map. And so an important thing, like Kayla mentioned, while we expect suburban commercial areas to still be suburban in nature, have a lot of parking, we would still want to encourage and push these areas to become more walkable so they can be accessible for pedestrians as well as people in cars. And so a lot of what your discussion was on that case was how to make that happen. And that's something our policy working groups will also need to work on as well. So that is just one short example of how the place type map might work in real life. If anyone wants, we can also pull up the online map and zoom in and talk about any particular area. But other than that, we will turn it back over to the commission, and we'd be happy to answer any questions or take any comments that you all have.
Awesome. Thank you all. Before recognizing Commissioner Baker, I just, again, want to thank the staff for all the work y'all are doing on this. It's a big lift, and really appreciate the service y'all are providing for our community. And I'm looking forward to this discussion because this is getting into some of the more fun parts of the comprehensive plan. And yeah, I'm excited to hear everyone's thoughts. Commissioner Baker.
Thank you, and thanks for the overview on that, everybody. Sorry, I wanted to jump on this first because I'm gonna probably have to catch a flight here soon. So, but I'm gonna listen to the conversation as much as I can. So just a couple, and I have obviously a long list of questions, but I just want to touch on a couple of them and have a couple of comments. So first of all, like future land use maps and place type maps, they can be used, not just for assessing rezoning cases, but they can be used also for sort of comprehensive UDO rewrites, comprehensive remapping projects. Is that something that staff at the planning department is looking at? And I'll just say, I mean, we have to. So I hope that that is what staff is looking at and the direction that we're trying to go. But I just wanted to know if that played into the work that has been done thus far on the drafting of the place type map.
Yeah, Commissioner Baker, absolutely. We agree with you. The place time map doesn't mean anything unless we have zoning districts that we can use to implement it. And it's probably obvious that there are some place types, some of our newer, more innovative ones don't really have good zoning equivalents in our current UDO. So we fully intend to do UDO updates as soon as the comprehensive plan is, or start working on them. They will take some time, obviously, but as soon as the comprehensive plan is done, we'll have to prioritize which ones are most important, obviously. So yeah, and potentially some strategic zoning map changes as well, if need be.
Okay. Second question, very high level, broad question, and Scott or whoever wants to answer can answer it. But right now in Durham, 96% of the population can only get to work by using a car. That is how people get around. We know this is horrible for equity, horrible for the environment, that auto-oriented infrastructure is extremely expensive, that owning a car is extremely expensive and burdensome on so many people. And meanwhile, we do have policies in the current comprehensive plan that have called for those changes. And yet over the past 3 years, we continue to sort of like approve things that come through the pipeline that developers propose that are auto-oriented, continue to be auto-oriented. So my question is, does this map, in your opinion, move us in a more transformative way, move us in the right direction away from that kind of thinking and away from that kind of development?
Yeah, I believe it does. Obviously, it's hard. We have to take what we are to what we want to be, and it will take a while. I think it's particularly hard because we have a lot of developed areas in Durham that are already not served by transit, and so and it takes a lot of money to provide new transit service. So we're gonna have to be realistic with how we do that. But I'll say because of some of the key things that we're trying to do with this map and with the plan in general is, one, take advantage of our existing and planned transit lines, not put all our eggs in the light rail basket, but all of our bus lines to encourage higher density and kind of walkable mixed use in key locations along all those lines that have good high quality service. And the other is to more thoughtfully think about how far we grow out. The last comprehensive plan kind of moved our suburban tier out to the watershed boundaries and kind of said, we'll grow out here sometime without any kind of phasing or plan for how to serve that area with infrastructure. And so that's why with the adjustments to the urban growth boundary and the inclusion of future growth areas, which are kind of phased growth areas, kind of more thoughtfully determine how we kind of grow outward while still encouraging a lot more of kind of growing up and inward.
Okay, thanks for that, Scott. And I get skeptical because of what I've seen, being justified to approve certain types of development that I just don't think tend to be consistent with the goals that people of Durham, want to achieve. So, as you know, I will continue asking that question. Just three other little comments here, so I'm done with my questions. I want to touch on the urban growth boundary. I obviously really, really like the urban growth boundary idea. And I don't know if you have it in the draft, but I think it is also important to really have a straightforward guide for how the urban growth boundary might change. I'm assuming there's eventually going to be pressure. How are we going to change when the urban growth boundary changes? And also ensuring that when it does change, when we do grow outward, that new growth is consistent with the goals and the policies, truly consistent, not just checking the box, but truly consistent with more walkable, sustainable, equitable type of development. So that's one comment. The other one is I would like to see, this is just a comment of mine, but I would like to see in each of the place types more detail about urban form and character, and what streets are like, and what buildings are, and where are they located relative to the street, and the width of the sidewalk, and those kinds of things. I'd like to see more detail there. I didn't see very much detail. I saw more detail actually on use than sort of in a more Euclidean tradition. And I would just like to see more detail and direction provided regarding urban form and character, so that we truly have some direction to move in and some guidance on those things. And then the last comment I have is very minor, but just making sure that we're not kind of stuck in this old way of thinking of like residential over here, commercial over here. I know that that's not the intent of the current state of the draft place type map, but I did notice a few parts where it did seem to keep that kind of like dividing uses. For example, in the established neighborhoods, sort of making it clear that it's okay to have some non-residential neighborhood serving neighborhood scale uses. So just keeping that in mind. So that's all. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Commissioner Baker. Commissioner Cease.
Thank you. I raised my hand there because I'm hopeful that Commissioner Baker can hear some of my comments before he has to leave our meeting. First of all, kudos to the staff for tackling such a tremendous amount of work. And I say that with a kind of gentle reminder of how complimentary I hope I came across when we last heard an update, particularly on the engagement phase. And I thought staff did a tremendous job in framing that work, and now it's evident continuing to carry that work forward. And in particular, the coding exercise of the inputs in the early phase of collecting input from the community, I thought was really well done. And having the opportunity that we all did to review and provide comments on the place types guide is also much appreciated. And seeing how that has evolved and hopefully will continue to evolve has been helpful. I'm mentioning that because my comments tonight may not sound as laudatory, because I have some real concerns. Very sharp concerns that have kind of become clearer to me as I've kind of gone back and forth between the place types guide in its draft form, the place types map, hearing the presentation tonight. The example, Scott, that you showed of the case we heard a month or so ago is a great example. So I'm going to try to categorize my comments in a couple of categories, a couple of buckets. I have some real conceptual concerns about the way we're seeing this move forward, and that's why I jumped on here right after Commissioner Baker was talking. I want him to hear this. It dovetails in some ways with what some of the concerns he was expressing. I have some very technical concerns about, and I say technical because of how certain parcels were coded in this draft map that I think are problematic. And that's only out of a handful that I looked at. And I guess I want to make a third comment about the urban growth boundary question that was also referenced in the examples that you identified, or the staff identified. I would appreciate, and I think it would be very important to have something that's extremely clear graphically showing where those differences are. I looked at the draft place types map, and with the key, it's simply I had to go back to the zoning map to see where the changes were, And so it's just not called out clear enough graphically. Some future land use areas or future growth areas appear to be within the current boundary, some appear to be without. And I'm still not clear, but that's such a critical item, I think, consideration for our community as a whole, to understand if something is being proposed to be changed, as was mentioned with the portion just west off 751. And I have some, looked at a number of those parcels for different reasons through the years. I have some real concerns about suggesting that we just open that up for development. So those are the three buckets. Let me try to hit these quickly and open it up for others as well, preserve time for others. But conceptually, Carl said it, this is not a place types map. This is a land use map. And I believe conceptually that we have spent this time on developing a place types guide that uses the language of places and uses the word neighborhood in particularly extensively, both in the titles and in the descriptions, and has a lot of good material and commentary and instruction regarding the types of places that we want to have. But then those places are assigned to the individual parcels as if it is a land use. And this gets back to Commissioner Baker's point. This is really just a land use map. And a lot of the place types are excessively segregated by use. We have, whatever it is, 4 different neighborhood categories, all in the predominantly residential places that's characterized by use. And I think that's a mistake. I think it's when I say mistake, I mean it's inconsistent with what I think are both the demands that we have as a community to address some of those equity issues we heard at the outset expressed by numerous commissioners, and the opportunity that we have by going through this process. And my sense is there may be other ways to address this conceptual question, but my sense is that we really need an intermediate step. We need a place types map before we get to a land use map, because right now the draft place types map is a land use map. And there are categories in there, again, and I'll use this apartment townhouse neighborhood category. I've yet, in my 20 plus years of urban design practice, I've yet to find an apartment and townhouse neighborhood, because there are other things that have to be in a place to make it a neighborhood. And so, for the past 7 or 8 years, I've walked my kids or have my kids walk 4.5 blocks down the street to school. And I looked at the map. They pass 6 different apartment and townhouse neighborhoods on that walk. They're not in 6 different neighborhoods. We're in one neighborhood, maybe 2, so I think there's a fundamental conceptual question with the way we're using the term neighborhood and the way these places are described and the way it's being translated into the map. So I would encourage staff to kind of rethink this. I don't know if it's hierarchy, but there's something missing in translation, in my view, because we're using language that makes it sound like we're not talking about land use, but really this is a land use map, and ultimately these are land use categories, despite all the other good work that's expressed therein. That was one example, Scott, the example you showed with the apartment and townhouse neighborhood, the case we heard. If it's only a neighborhood, if there's also commercial, if there's also recreation, and you have 6 different land uses in that map, those are land use maps. That's not a place type map. That's my view. So those are some of the examples, kind of technical examples, I would say, where we're using this, deploying it at the scale of the parcel is problematic relative to the way the guide has been structured. The last piece of that, I would say, is we've colored the recreation spaces because that's kind of one palette. We need to color the public rights of way that makes up so much of our land, and the character of a place type doesn't manifest itself unless there is some expressed intent with regards to what those streets, roadways, et cetera, are looking like, the way they're going to perform. And so that's, I would say, analogous to Commissioner Baker's suggestion of having something about urban form in there, because right now there's in the apartment and townhouse use, the way it's, or, excuse me, apartment and townhouse neighborhood, the way it's sprinkled throughout the city, there's no distinguishing, even though in the text of the place types guide, there's discussion of what's in there. There's no distinguishing those differences. And it's those differences that determine the place type, in my view. And so, I would encourage going forward, thinking about this as a means by which we can achieve what Carl stated, which is to have different characteristics that match a patchwork of places that make a community, not a patchwork of land uses. Patchwork of land uses are important, but I think there's an intermediate step that is missing at this point in time. So that's what I have. So rights of way, and I can look at, there's several other examples I'll share with staff of particular parcels that have been identified as one particular place type that I think is deeply inconsistent with either existing approved plans or often in contentious cases, or with what's really kind of present there. That's my sense. And so I'll leave it at that. But having said that, I applaud the amount of work. I just think it needs to be reformulated a bit around terminology and deploying the terminology in a scale that's consistent with what we're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cease. Commissioner Batista.
Hi, yeah, just a couple of comments and questions on that. I hear what everybody's saying, and forgive my ignorance because I'm kind of new to it. But land use and place type maps can both be provided in the same map. So in my perspective, the question is really about how the map is applied, not necessarily what's on it or how it's created. Because I feel like engagement is part of the solution. The other part is informing, and that's the job of the map, is for both. So as we move forward with it, I have a whole number of questions, too many for right now, but I think the crux of it is what does the map go on to do as far as policy regulation? How does it actually implement? And if the public votes on something that then turns into an economic disaster, or it feeds into a added crime rate or something like that, like how do you undo? So that becomes more about how you apply it and not necessarily what's in it.
So, sorry, Commissioner Batista. So, I don't think I fully understood the question. So, is the question, how does it get applied?
Well, I'm wondering, because it's at an early stage, I'm not expecting a solid answer to it, okay. But really, how does the place type map or land use map or both connect to policy? We have a continual improvement opportunity, but then when it comes time to make a decision, it's not that easy. Then you still have to go through a whole series of processes. So the more engagement you get, you want to make sure that it's informed engagement, and that's my concern. So in making that connection, you're exposing a lot of information to the public. They may not understand it. They may not even be aware of it. So some group might be able to influence place types or land use in an area where those residents might not be as well informed. So there still are disparities and potentials for conflict there. So I'm wondering how could we plan to mitigate those before they happen?
Yeah, I think one, we want to keep in kind of active engagement on the map as well as the policies until the comprehensive plan is adopted later this year. So we'll have kind of more and more opportunities to do that. And I think the second thing is any implementation measure for the map or the plan is going to take a separate action, whether it's a zoning change or a UDO amendment or a budgetary decision. So there's always, the plan doesn't implement itself once it's adopted. So there's always checks. And so, for example, if you rezone a property to implement something that's on the map, then it has to go through the full kind of public hearing process with notification, and there's still no requirement that something has to be approved just because it's on the map.
Thank you for that. Other questions, comments? So for me, my primary concern is clarity on the process moving forward. I understand there's a comment period that is closing at the end of this month for the first round of the place type guide and place type map review. What's the plan? I think I have two questions. One, what is the plan beyond that? And two, for staff, is it most helpful for you all to receive comments from commissioners directly through email? Would you all prefer us using the place type map and being able to comment right on that? What would be the most effective method for us to continue to provide comments and questions? Because I also recognize we have 12 minutes left and will not be able to ask all of our questions tonight. And I certainly have plenty myself.
Yeah, I think in general, I'd say if you have very specific comments about a specific parcel, for whatever reason, it'd probably be best to use it on the map. If it has, I think what Commissioner Cease was talking about sounded like something kind of in the middle where he thought maybe they might just be wrong. Those, I'd like to, if you could email those to us, that would be good, so we can just double check, because we did have to work through 120,000 parcels, so there could be something that's just incorrect. But then if there's just, like you all have been doing, if there's just kind of general vibes about what you do and don't like about the map, or you want more of this or less of this, I think just getting your comments tonight and at subsequent sessions that's most important, since you all have a unique role in the crafting of the comprehensive plan. And I think just in general, we're still ironing out exactly the next steps of the process for the map. What we're planning on doing right now is closing the comment period on January 31st, collecting all those comments. We've been collecting technical corrections to the map, and then at some point in the not too distant future, publish a new map with the technical corrections with a kind of a list of what was changed, and then continue to take comments on the map and not publish a new version until we feel like we've gotten good engagement and a lot of comments. So that would be later on, kind of near the end of when we do the policy engagement in the spring.
Okay. And I know we've been approving the comp plan in phases. We started with the community goals and objective. Is this going to be a next phase, or is it kind of like we did the goals and now the next thing we'll see is the rest of the plan?
Yeah, we had originally talked about it doing multiple phases, but then a COVID came along and kind of screwed up our timeline. So it's basically two phases: the goals and objectives, and then the whole plan. So we want to we're going to keep kind of releasing information in phases so that it's more digestible to folks. And we knew the map would be the hardest thing for folks to digest, because most people that aren't used to kind of using maps, Commissioner Batista aside, as a way to make understand what's happening and make decisions. So that's why we did that first, and then the policies will come next. But it'll be the full comprehensive plan will be the next thing that you all consider.
Okay, that sounds great. And then I would just say one quick comment before passing it on to my fellow commissioners. The one thing, I think I've kind of relayed this to Kayla and Scott and Michael, just about the importance of using the comp plan as a communication tool. And we talked about that in terms of how we're talking about change and being clear of like the types of change. And I enjoyed seeing that update tonight. One thing that talking through this just now brought up for me is making sure we're also clear, and I'm sure you're all thinking about this, of laying out the relationship between the place types map and the zoning map, because I found myself as a drainage planner flummoxed at time at what seems to be discrepancies between those, or the relationship between those two maps. And so I hope to see a clear kind of explanation of that in the future. But I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Commissioner Busby.
Thanks, Chair Amendolia. I just had a couple very brief comments. One, I did want to echo Commissioners Baker and Cease, if I understood them correctly. I like the concept of the urban growth boundary, and I like that it is attached to providing services. This seems like a logical extension of the process we've been through in Southeast Durham with planning as well. I do want to make sure that we're really thoughtful about looking at the different parcels, as Commissioner Cease said as well. And I think one of the biggest things is making sure that communities are aware of where they may be landing in the boundary. And so I'm anxious to get this process finished. We've been working on this for a really long time. I'm confident that the equitable engagement will allow us to get it right. And then my question is, actually, I've heard Bragtown mentioned, and maybe this is a good case example. Could you walk through Bragtown, where they land in this current process, and then kind of how you might think about working with Bragtown to solicit their feedback and input before we get to the finish line, to make sure that regardless of where they land, they have been engaged in the process, understand the process, and are bought into the process as it moves along. Because that's a big decision of where does a community land in regards to the urban growth boundary.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Busby. And if one of my colleagues, if I say something wrong, if you jump in and stop me. For those of you who've been working closer with Bragtown, we still have an ongoing relationship with Bragtown. They've had some internal things they decided to work on that they thought was more important at this point, and they have some issues coming up. So we haven't been as actively involved with Bragtown lately as we had in the past, and thought we would be throughout this. We're still committed to working with Bragtown when they're ready, and we haven't quite. We just need to wait and see to understand when they might be ready to spend more time on the big picture things like the comprehensive plan rather than their immediate needs. So yeah, that's probably not a very fulfilling answer, but yeah, there's some unique circumstances with Bragtown at the moment. Okay.
And I've mostly just used them as one example, and it was stuck in my head since they were mentioned during the presentation, but I do think the engagement with various communities, neighborhoods throughout Durham, especially in regards to the urban growth boundary, strike me as a really important part of this process from now through the adoption process. Again, I'm confident that the staff's doing, I think, a very good job with the engagement and listening and balancing the listening with moving our process forward so we can actually get this adopted and move to the next phase. So I just wanted to raise that, but that's it. Thank you, Chair Amendolia.
Thank you. Commissioner Cutright.
Appreciate it, Chair. So I guess just a quick thought here. This process of creating, the place type maps and then moving on to policy and everything that's encompassed in that is, Commissioner Cease is called out some very nuanced things, and there are a ton of unintended consequences that people like myself, and I'm sure there are maybe other commissioners who aren't engaged in urban planning on a day-to-day basis, don't understand. And so I guess my first thought here is about accountability, right? And so as we move forward, what I don't hear is, what I heard from Commissioner Cease is we should be reconsidering some things. I have not heard that from Mr. Whiteman, that, hey, let's go back and reconsider some things. I've not heard that explicitly or implicitly, that we're going to take a step back and reconsider some things. What I keep hearing is let's push forward and get to this next phase. But it sounds like there's some nuance in what's already been done, specifically, as Cease pointed out, as it relates to sort of the hierarchy and how we start to make decisions around these place types and or use types, and then how that informs policy. All this is a lot of nuance that I'm not an expert on, but I hear the nuance. And so for me, what comes to mind is, as we continue to push forward, if we push forward in the wrong way, like, where's the accountability lie there? Is that just, look, planning said we're moving forward. We reached out to who we could reach out to. We did the best we could, and here's where we are. We've got to take this and move forward. Or is there some real opportunity to take a step back and maybe that's not the right thing to do. I don't know. I'm just raising the question. Take a step back, reconsider, maybe how we're approaching this. I recognize that there's limited resources and time and all of those things associated with this. But it sounds like there could be some unintended consequences, or we're not going to get the results that we're looking for. I think another big part of that is doing more examples like, what does Bragtown look like? How is this impacted? And not waiting for them to come back and say, now we have time. This is something that I think we start talking about equity and thinking about how we move forward. We have to be active and engaged and move forward and say, Bragtown, hey, look, we're raising our hand. We're telling you this is how this is going to impact you. Let's be clear about that. Otherwise, one of the unintended consequences may be, look, planning move forward. They didn't talk to us about it. And you'll say, well, we asked you and you didn't have time. I don't know if that's the right way to move on this, but I guess I'll leave it there and say, where's the accountability, and how do we ensure that we're making the right decisions going forward?
Let's see, one thing, and I'll back up. I know Commissioner Busby had brought up Bragtown in particular. So we were kind of working, they had kind of a special relationship with us. So that's why I brought that one up. But we do still have our engagement ambassador program, and they are actively working on the map. And so we're working with neighborhoods, particularly, neighborhoods who aren't normally involved in planning processes like Bragtown. So they have folks from their community engaging their community and kind of looking at the map and trying to figure out what it means for them. I think we've set up a series of meetings with our contractor who's kind of helping us with that, to invite some of those ambassadors and their contacts to come. They get a planning staff person to answer questions and or give direct feedback to. So we are trying to do that. This is the first draft of possibly many of the map, and so we want to try to get as much feedback as possible. We've heard your comments tonight. This is the first chance you all have really gotten to provide us this feedback. So we're going to have to digest it and take it back. I will say we do have our elected officials would like a new comprehensive plan right now. So we still have to keep it, and our community does too, to be honest. And so we don't have unlimited time. And ultimately, it's the city council and the board of commissioners are the ones, they have to decide if they're comfortable approving it. And we do updates to the Joint City County Planning Committee, which has members of both boards every other month. And so they kind of give us, we ask them specifically each time, are we on the right track, or do you want us to do something different? So that's that's how I'd answer the accountability question.
Thank you, Commissioner Cutright. I want to express my appreciation for those comments. I think that's an important framing for all of us. definitely before we go, I want to make sure everyone saw the email, and also to just say out loud for any public attendees tonight that our next planning commission meeting got moved to January 27th. That is not our typical night of the month, but we will be meeting January 27th. So I guess congrats on a little bit of extra time off, or at least delayed time off for everyone. And then beyond that, our date should remain the same for the most part. I think we have one meeting change we will be voting on, and we'll discuss that at our January meeting. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. Don't forget to send your comments, further comments on this to staff, and continue engagement with it. I really appreciate all of you and all the comments you've had. It helps me think more about this as well and think about further questions I have. But you all work hard, and I don't want to take more of your time. And unless staff has anything else, I would recommend us dismissing. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.